here with Tenuta of the University of Manitoba, standing in front of a pile of what was dairy manure. Now it's turning into compost. Mario, just as a basic question, for farmers, what's the value in spending the time and energy turning manure into compost?
Well, turning manure into compost provides more options to growers how to handle with the manure waste, but also other waste that they may have on their farm or that may potentially down the road come to the farm. You may have waste bales, waste feed bales, bedding straw material that may be served its day or is a bit during storage, the quality is degraded. And then there's also the opportunities for taking in municipal wastes, waste from yard trimmings, organic waste from kitchens and so forth. So we're not at that stage in terms of with farmers accepting those materials, but it gives options. And in particularly, there could be options where, depending on some types of manures, particular manures that we would stockpile and it could be stinky, or have odors to them, or composting is a wonderful way of getting rid of odors pretty fast in the material. That's one thing. The other thing about composting that growers like is that it can be a volume reduction mechanism in terms of getting rid of about 2/3 of the volume of the material that would have to be land applied.
How about from a nutrient perspective when applied to the soil? What's the difference?
Well, from a nutrient standpoint, there's quite a bit of difference because the compost is a stabilized material, which is basically producing the humus that we find in the soil, that black material, the organic matter in soil. It's stabilized, and the nutrients are in that form, so they become a long-term, slow-release source of nutrients, and they're stabilized. So let's take, for example, a dry chicken manure or poultry manure of some sort. If that gets wet, it will become odorous and you get a levelization of ammonia. Well, maybe producers cannot stockpile the material in a dry form, and so being able to compost it is one way of keeping the nitrogen and phosphorus in a stabilized form rather than for nitrogen in particular going up to the atmosphere. So it gives them an option.
Okay.
If they have a liquid manure, it becomes more challenging to compost because there's just so much sheer volume of water. It's challenging to add enough carbon through just straw or waste feed to that material. But the liquid material can be part of a mixture of material starting.
Or you could put it through a machine that would dehydrate it in some form or remove moisture from it?
Yeah, so our research at the University of Manitoba has exactly examined that in terms of taking pig slurry, putting it through a centrifuge, separating out the solids from the pig slurry, which in effect takes a lot of the phosphorus, puts it into that residing in that solid material. Then that solid material, if it re-wets or even if it stays in a pile, the nitrogen will be lost during the piling of it. So if we compost it, we think we can keep the nitrogen in the pile, definitely keep in the compost, and we can also keep the phosphorus present in the compost. And if we have other material like bedding material, then it's a great way of stabilizing, mixing waste materials together, reducing the volume that has to be land applied.
Mm-hmm. The compost process itself is largely driven or related to the carbon versus nitrogen ratio. You talked about how it's the pasta versus the meatball.
Yeah, right. The pasta and the meatball.
Right.
So the pasta is the carbon. So we want lots of carbon to start off with, and then we want the protein or the nitrogen, which would be the meat. And so to start off with, we want about a 30-to-1 carbon to nitrogen ratio. The finished product of a true compost product will be about 10-to-1, 12-to-1. Okay, so it narrows down as the CO2, as the carbon is lost to the atmosphere through microbial respiration. So it comes down to actually carbon nitrogen ratio is very similar to the organic matter that's present in soil.
And that's what makes it ideal for putting into our garden or onto a field?
It's a stabilized form of nitrogen. The nitrogen is not going to be quick release. And probably more important in terms of nutrients is the phosphorus. It's just a wonderful plant available source of phosphorus.
And if we're relying on manure, or not manure, sorry, I'll start this again. And because of it being a good source of phosphorus, we really can't rely on compost to meet all the nitrogen needs. We'll have too much phosphorus if we do that.
Exactly. If we're applying the compost to meet the nitrogen needs of the crop, we're going to be adding way too much phosphorus. So basically, we could add the compost to meet the phosphorus requirements. We'll get some benefit in terms of nitrogen. We'll get lots of benefit in terms of other nutrients as well, potassium and metals, calcium, magnesium. So we'll get other benefits as well in there. So it's not just about the phosphorus or the nitrogen. So it's the other nutrients as well. But yes, so it's really good for people to realize that no, they should not be managing the compost addition rates to meet the nitrogen needs of the crop.
Mm-hmm. And finally, then, why do you see potential for this, or where do you see this going down the road for farmers in Canada?
Yeah, where do we see compost moving towards? Well, I think there's several fronts, and they probably vary across Canada in terms of what the local opportunities are. So where we are in Manitoba, I see opportunities with separation of solids from pig slurry. I see that one as one option. I see another option in terms of manures such as dairy manure. That would be, or it can often be pretty high in moisture content. It becomes, for stockpiling, it becomes pretty, there's a lot of leachate, and then it could be odor from that. So I can see composting be an effective means of reducing that problem with leachate and with odor. I can see in terms of particular organic crop production, because if you do good true composting and let it mature and cure very well for a long period of time, good likelihood you get organic certification to be put on your land. So I see that as being a very, very good opportunity for growers across Canada for the organic production. And then I see in particularly where we have biofuel production, the ethanol production, or even with municipal digesters in terms of municipal sanitation systems, the digestate that they're producing, that can be composted rather than going into a landfill. Sometimes the material people don't want it to go directly to land. They say it has some odor problems and issues like that. So composting can fit in many ways. And particularly with growers, one of the key things is that this idea of stabilizing nutrients so they don't lose it during stockpiling, but also the volume reduction. So if they can just reduce their volume, that means it's less work to be applying. And in many ways, it's a lot easier to incorporate into the soil and add it to the soil as well, as a compost rather than a raw manure.
Yeah. And I guess this might be even further down the road, or I think this is just in the very early stages, but this idea of nutrients that farmers have supplied to cities, the organic or any compostable material potentially coming back to the farm and providing good value to the soil?
I don't think that's potential. I think that's a must-be. I think that's an absolute must-be. We have to think about our own lives and as humans in terms of the recycling of the nutrients. So we're part of a massive amount of nutrient movement locally and globally. And so we have to think about our place in that. And putting things to landfill is just not going to cut it. And having nutrients build up in the city so that it can run off and storm water to the river is just not going to cut it anymore. So farmers spend a lot of money applying nutrients, getting nutrients onto their land so they can produce good crops to feed people. And so there's a need there to replenish those nutrients. So one thing I think is inevitable is that we have to tighten up our recycling of getting those nutrients out of the urban areas back onto the land, and I think composting is a means of that. One of the great things about composting is that the fact that it will go through sterilization processes in terms of with high temperature, and we want to always ensure safety of materials, be animal or human type materials, waste materials going on to land. So the composting is part of that safety net.
All right. Well, thanks for your time, Mario.
You're welcome.